Hey there everyone, this is Victor with VictorVectorJKU. Today we're going to do a recap of the damage that happened last weekend at Reiter Foothills ORV I and what we're going to do to repair it and upgrade it. Let's get into it. So last weekend I set up a little meet and greet and day of off-roading up at Reiter Foothills ORV area. We had a blast of a day. But unfortunately on the very first trail, 3 obstacles in, I had a little bit too much wheel speed coming up over a rock obstacle, ended up coming into another large rock.
There you go. Oh!
Didn't know what it was. At first I was thinking, oh crap, it's on my rear drive line, because I knew that I was sitting on a rock back there. Ends up, it was just the spider gears that ended up shearing on me. I was still able to continue wheeling during the day. I just took it easy and tried to wheel as much in 2-wheel drive as I could. Fortunately, one of the people that joined us on our day was at Prometheus_JKU or Chris, saying, hey, let's go ahead and head back to my place. I have a shop. We can go ahead and dig into the front end and see what we can get figured out. So we went over to his place, we diagnosed, we tore into the front end, and we were able to figure out that it was just the spider gears. We pulled
It's not supposed to be green.
It's not supposed to be green and sparkly.
We pulled the carrier, pulled the axle shafts, and I was able to just drive home in 2-wheel drive. So in review of the carrier, I've been able to identify that there's no other damage to the ring gear or the rest of the carrier. It was contained just the spiders. So I started looking for a replacement set of spider gears. In my research, I found that they were running about $320 for the replacement set through all the suppliers that I found, and everyone that I reached out to had them on back order. So I decided to go a different route, and I figured, you know, let's try something. So I don't want to invest a lot of money into my front axle being a Dana 30. So right now I'm looking for what is the solution that I can keep this Dana 30 running for now. So I reached out to Northridge 4x4, which is a local shop here in Washington, and I ordered the Torq Locker by Torq Masters Industries. So what this is a lunchbox style or ratchet style locker. So if you're not familiar with what a lunchbox locker is, it is a locker mechanism that is designed to fit in the factory carrier of your differential. It's a good way to go that you don't have to then reset your ring and pinion, change any shims or bearings out. You can just basically take out your spider gears and replace it with this new locker system. It is a low cost way to do it, and I thought I'd give it a try out. So really quick, just to explain a little bit more of the ratchet style and how that works. So you can see that we have the 2 different pieces. So you have the center piece that goes to the center of the carrier, and you have the outside piece that has these splines in it for where the axle shaft will stick to. So this is what will create the traction. So you can see that these teeth are machined at a very tight tolerance, and they match up just right. There's really no slop in this at all. And so what happens is when you get on a tight turn, it allows this guy to then rotate like this, and that is the ratcheting function that allows one tire to spin at a different rate than the other. So let's talk about some of the attributes of the Torq Locker. So first, it's made here in the USA. They also come with a 4-year warranty under normal use and service. And they provide detailed instructions that outlines the process to install the locker, as well as some of the necessary tools that you need to have. It only came in at about $400. So let's go ahead and start tearing down my differential carrier and get this locker installed. You may not need to do this in your scenario, but I do in mine. So I have 373 gears, so the cut and thickness of my ring gear interferes with the pin. Now, you can see how the pin there and the ring gear interferes, so it wouldn't be able to slide out with that ring gear where it's at. Spider gear's in place. So with that, that means that I have to disassemble my ring gear from my carrier to be able to slide that out and disassemble the internals or the spider gears. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a towel underneath the ring gear. To go ahead and remove these, I'm going to be using an 11/16 socket on a breaker bar, and I'm going to be using my dead blow mallet to break these guys. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to unseat the ring gear from the carrier using my dead blow mallet. All right, there we go. And so again, this is the reason why I have this towel here, just so it didn't drop down and cause any damage. And then over here to the side, I actually have a little cardboard box that I'm just putting all my parts into. That way I don't lose anything during the disassembly process. So what we're first gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and slide this guy out. We wanna keep in mind which of the spider gears go where, because there are thrust washers on either side that we need to reuse when we install the Torq Locker. So we do wanna keep that in mind. So we'll go in first, pull out our shaft. And then what we can do is we can go ahead and spin our spider gears, and they should be able to now, the two side ones should just sort of slip out. And so this is the thrust washer that I was talking about. Now one thing, I have the races for these bearings sitting over here, and I have them labeled right hand and left hand so that they get installed back on the correct sides. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and take these guys, when I take them out, and put them to the corresponding side as well. So now this is the one that got the most damage, and you can see how much it just got sheared up. Really good job. Then we can go ahead and remove the other side as well. All right, so that's everything that we need to do for disassembly. So the next step is gonna be jumping into the reassembly with the Torq Locker. So first off, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and go through here, wipe everything up, clean it up, make sure I don't have any debris in here from when the spider gears shattered. All right, so first thing before we jump into this, while I put on my gloves here, I wanna talk about speaking with Torq Masters Industries and Cora there. She was a great pleasure to work with. She was very kind, courteous, outgoing. She wanted to see that this product worked for me. She was definitely compassionate about getting me correct parts and everything to make sure that this all worked out properly. So the initial kit came with a 20,000 thrust washer, and she also provided me with a 30,000 thrust washer. So I measured my initial gap with the 20,000 thrust washer in there, and I was coming up with a center gap of 225 thousandths to 215 thousandths. And the happy medium is between 145 thousandths to 175 thousandths. So that put me right about 60 thousandths oversized from where I should have been with the 20 thousandths washers. So what she did was she provided me another set of washers, which are 30 thousandths, so that gets me my 60 thousandths that I'm missing. It's important to match the shim thickness on both sides, so I'm running 50 thousandths on either side of my carrier now. So with that, I've already assembled it, I've checked everything, everything's good, but I'm gonna show you guys some of the tips and tricks that I pulled together while assembling and disassembling this. So they say use a light grease. Personally, what I found is just some gear oil does just as sufficient of a job, and it pre-lubricates everything as well. So that's what I'm using to hold all of my components together now, is just a little bit of gear lube. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start off with installing our 50 thousandths of shims, or whatever thickness of shim that you need, onto one of the axle gears. We're gonna go ahead and set that into place on the ring side first. Then we're gonna bring in the other side with, again, 50 thousandths of shims, for my case specifically, and put that on the opposite side of the ring, and we'll set that in place. What I'm gonna then do is I'm gonna grab both of my cam gears, and I'm gonna go ahead and set these guys into place kind of conjointly. So notice that there's these two flat milled surfaces. That's how it fits into the carrier. So we're gonna go ahead and slip in first the side with the ring while holding it in place. Make sure that you have the two open slots up. We're going to take our other cam gear with the posts up this time, and we're going to just sort of slide him into place. Mesh up the gears, and we're good to go in that step there. Now, this shouldn't be too difficult. When I did my first install, this was quite difficult because my factory thrust washers, these guys are actually dished a little bit, but it's a 50 thousandths thick shim, but it is dished, so it actually makes it almost 80 thousandths, and that is the reason why I wasn't getting the tolerance I needed with this shim or with the 20 thousandths alone. So once we get to this point, what we can go ahead and do is we can rotate our cam gear and axle gears 90 degrees so that we can then slide in our cross pin. Make sure that you have the side with the hole drilled out of it matching to the side that your tension pin is on, and in the same rotation so that that tension pin can be hammered into place. At that point, we're going to go ahead and install the springs into the two sides. So what I found to be really helpful when installing the springs is to find something that you can wedge the gears open with a little bit. So what I'm going to use here is a 1/8 inch pin. I'm just going to put that in place and align my spring slot. So with that kind of just holds it open and gets me a little bit better advantage. I'm going to go ahead and insert the spring with 1/2, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply pressure down on the top of the spring here while pushing in on this lower edge until it clears and is able to fall into the slot. So you can see I'm kind of pushing, you can see it's getting close there, and then I just use this flathead screwdriver and continue to manipulate him inwards using a couple of different times, and then he is able then to just slide right on in. And then you just use the flathead, make sure he fully seats, and we're good to go. So that side is done. Now with care, I have not yet hammered in our tension pin yet, so this pin the cross pin will still want to slide out. So go ahead and hold that and rotate your carrier over. Now we have the Torq Locker installed, complete. The only thing left to do is to push in our roll pin. But first, I'm going to go ahead and check our center gap. I have a set of calipers, which I'm going to use. So first off, we'll go and check, make sure that it is zeroed, and we'll go ahead and come in and check our gap. So if you can read that, I'm at 154 thousandths. I'll check the other side. 153.5 thousandths. And we'll check this side as well. And I'm at 155.5 thousandths. 155 thousandths. So we are just in that sweet spot between 145 thousandths and 175 thousandths, with the nominal being 160 thousandths. We're good to go. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to rotate this guy up, and I'm going to punch my dowel pin into place and call it good. So I will just push out the cross pin a little bit and make sure that my alignment is good. You want to make sure that that tension pin goes in and it stays snug. So with that wraps up the install of the Torq Locker by Torq Masters Industries in a Dana 30 carrier. So now, next thing all I have to do is I'm going to then finish up mounting the ring gear. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure the surface here is cleaned up. Alright, so got the ring gear cleaned off, we have the main surface cleaned off, so we can go ahead and bring him back. What we're going to have to do is we're going to have to hand start just a couple of the bolts, and then what we'll do is we'll give it a couple of knocks just to seat the ring gear back onto the carrier. Okay, so I got 3 in place. I'm going to go ahead and take my dead blow. I'm just going to go ahead and work around it. That'll do. Alright, so I got my ring gear set now. Go ahead and keep getting these guys tightened on. I'll go ahead and install the rest of the bolts, and I'll work around and torque them down. Alright guys, so next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put him back in the vise. Tighten the vise down, and we're going to go ahead and torque down our ring gear bolts. So I have my torque wrench set to 80 foot-pounds, which is what the service manual calls out for. So I'm going to go ahead and torque these guys down. So that wraps up torquing the ring gear back on. Next thing that I got to do, I'm going to lift up the front axle and get everything prepped to go ahead and throw this guy back in. I cleaned up the mating surface. Got all the thick RTV off, so I'm now down to a smooth surface. And I made sure all the inside's all cleaned out. So next thing we're going to be doing is installing the carrier back in. I started off with, I first put a little bit of wheel bearing grease into the bearings on either side of the carrier. Now I'm going to use a punch here just to help seat these shims on the side end. being very gentle with them. All right, so we should be good. We can go ahead and take our bearing caps and put them back on. I'm first gonna wipe them down real quick. And again, we're gonna use our witness mark. So you can see there's this upside down T right here that matches with what's on the side of the differential face, differential housing over here. So we'll go ahead and install this guy to match. And likewise on the other side too. All right, now these guys are gonna get torqued to 45 foot-pounds per the service manual. So I have my torque wrench sent to 45 foot-pounds. All right, so that is good to go. So that wraps up carrier. There is a test that I need to do with the cover off just to verify everything is functioning correctly before I put the cover back on and refill everything. So next, we're gonna go ahead and show you on one side what to do to reassemble your axle shaft. So I have my axle shaft. Now, being the case that I pulled it out, it's a good time to inspect it. I've already gone through and I've looked over all of the splines on both the differential side as well as the wheel side, and they are all in actually really good shape. That and the U-joint is still nice and tight and it feels really good. Right now would be an opportune time for me to change out my U-joints if they needed it, but honestly, I think they're pretty good right now. Now one thing I'm gonna do as well is I'm just gonna put a light coating of grease up here where the seal is going to sit on this chamfer, and then we'll go ahead and slide it back in. Now my axle shaft does have these little plastic guides, and these help align the shaft, so when you get in there you don't pop the seal. It's so that this will align better. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and make sure that first off, that our wheel speed sensor cable is routing up over top of the shaft. We'll go and insert this guy into the tube. Just like that. And with that, now we're engaged back to the differential. Next up, what we're gonna do is we will go ahead and reinstall our wheel bearing, the cover for the brake rotor. So make sure you remember to route your wheel speed sensor back through in the gap, and make sure this is aligned properly, that you have the cutout in the rear for where the caliper will go on. Then we'll go ahead and bring this guy back, line up the splines, and we'll go ahead and slide him on backwards. Before we get too far here, what we'll do is we'll reinstall our wheel speed sensor, and you need to be cautious here because this thing could snap right here, so we don't want to get too tight because you can't remove and install it with the shield in place. With that, we can go and reinstall our bolt, tighten it in with our 3/16 Allen key. Now we can go ahead and get our bearing back pressed in. And with that, we can reinstall our 3 bolts from the back side. Let's go ahead and tighten those guys in. We're going to torque these guys down at 75 foot-pounds each. I can go ahead and reinstall my caliper. So first reinstall the rotor, then we can go ahead and install our caliper. May be necessary to spread the caliper a little bit, but in my case, I'm able to slide it on just fine. Then we'll reinstall our 2 bolts in the back. And then we can go ahead and tighten those guys in. Alright, and then with that, these 2 are going to get torqued to 100 foot-pounds. Alright, now that I hooked the wheel speed sensor back up to all of its routing clips. Next up, I just got to tighten this guy in. Now this wheel nut uses a pretty large socket. You're going to need a 35mm is what the size is. The axle shaft was starting to turn as I was tightening this, so what I did was I shifted into 4-wheel drive and put it into gear. So now I shouldn't have to worry about that. All right, we are there. Now just to torque them in. All right, so 100 foot-pounds. And there we have it. All right, so that wraps up how to reinstall your axle shaft, caliper, rotor, and wheel bearing. With that, I'm gonna go ahead and repeat that on the other side. All right guys, so I have everything reassembled. I have the tires on, and what I'm gonna do is perform the spin test. I'm gonna rotate the driver tire forward until it engages the locker, as you can see there. Now I can rotate the passenger side tire backwards. And notice how the ratcheting starts happening. Now I'm going to rotate the driver tire backwards to engage it again. Rotate the passenger tire forward. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate the passenger tire backwards, engage the locker. I'm going to rotate the driver tire forward. I'm going to rotate the passenger tire forward, engage the locker. I'm going to rotate the driver tire backwards. With this, I've now performed both directions, and right now I do have the transfer case in four-wheel drive and in gear to prevent the drive shaft from spinning. And so the locker is functioning as expected. Now with the smooth motion that I have now, I should be able to drive in two-wheel drive on the street, and it should function very similarly to an open differential. The only difference is there will be some clicking like you heard during the spin test, but it will be muted out because the diff cover will be on and there will be fluid in the differential. All right, so we just wrapped up getting everything bolted back up. We have the diff cover back on. I'm just giving it some time for the RTV gasket maker to cure up before I go ahead and refill that with diff fluid. Otherwise, let's go ahead and break into a little bit of what I think about the install of the Torq Masters Industries Torq Locker. As far as the assembly goes, it was pretty simple. All you had to do was just pop off the ring gear once you had the carrier pulled out, and then pull the cross pin, pulling the spider gears out, and then put it in the new Torq Locker. I definitely think it's worth a shot. I'm running 37s on factory running gear. They say there's no horsepower max rating. I think with the new Torq Locker installed though, what it's going to do is now translate all that extra force out to the axle shafts as well as the U-joints. I'm thinking that I'm probably going to start seeing failures or more torque in those areas that possibly could be my new weak links, along with the drive shafts. I'm going to definitely put some road miles on. They recommend 600 miles to break in the locker. But yeah, so all in all, I enjoyed it. It was a good little project. It was fun to do something a little bit different, actually break into the axle and see how things work. So I definitely enjoyed it. I hope you guys enjoyed following along today. If you did, please hit that like button, give this video a thumbs up. If you're enjoying the content that I'm putting out there, please subscribe, sign up for notifications if you feel like it. And otherwise, we are VictorVectorJKU. We are taking on this build and the trails, both direction and magnitude. All right, guys, have a good one. We'll catch you next time.